It's going great. How about you?
It's going all right.
Outstanding, outstanding. So we're going to
Today,
talk about the um, history
yes,
of witchcraft today.
yep. So we have a section, history of the old religion.
Mhm.
Uh, and as time has gone on, we have more evidence. So you might already be aware of more evidence out there. So there is some goddess figurines which are debated that are 100,000 years old. They're debated because, was it shaped or was it a carried object? So it was a carried object, and because it was a carried object and not carved into that shape, that's the debate, not the debate whether or not it was a feminine religious artifact that is 100,000 years old. So there's that. Archaeological evidence for the existence of the old religion goes back to the Aurignacian period to the Upper Paleolithic, about 35,000 years ago. Of course, I just mentioned there's older evidence. This evidence consists of crude, faceless stone statuettes of heavily breasted female figures, sometimes holding the crescent moon in one hand. Archaeologists refer to these statues as Venuses because to them, they were obviously fertility symbols. They are found all over Europe, but also different parts of the world. Uh, uh, Also, Willendorf and I want to say it might be not Australia, which is written, but Austria.
Ah, yes, Willendorf is definitely Austria.
Austria, yeah.
And
So,
that's the thing with these old books,
yeah.
they're typed. So if you typed it, that was pretty much it, unless you went back and tried to mark it out. So yes,
Yeah. And we were carefully instructed not to make any changes.
yes, yes, we were.
Don't fix anything. Because if you fix it, it was probably meant to be broken. Um, so any little mistakes like that were sometimes like you could trace back and be like,
Not unlike not unlike today,
right?
when you leave little marks in your creations so you know where they end up.
Yes. The CIA is famous for doing this as they'll create stories that are partially false but partially true, and they'll insert little factoids in there so they can see the flow of information, so they can trace backward, like you're tracing a maybe a water leak. You might put like some dye in the water, and then we're like, oh, okay, this is where our leak is coming from. Um, they're found all over Europe. The function of the Venuses was to ensure the fertility of mortal women by magical analogy to the source of all fertility, the Great Mother. It was to be many ages before she received the refinement of the tragic Demeter of Eleusis or Isis of Egypt. Nevertheless, the goddess was unmistakably present in the rock shelters of the Upper Paleolithic 35,000 years ago. 20,000 years later, in the Magdalene period of the Upper Paleolithic, we find similar evidence for the invocation of the horned god. The people of the Magdalene period were great artists, and in the depths of these caves, they painted wonderful, lifelike pictures of the animals they hunted and of a horned figure they invoked in southern France, which is Cave of the Three Brothers. People seem to know it by its English name more these days. Archaeologists have dubbed the painting of the horn god in the cave the sorcerer. He is the direct ancestor of the Greek Pan and of the horn god we know today by names such as Hern and Cernunnos. People also say Cernunnos. And apparently both are acceptable depending on where you live.
Fair enough. I've also heard it with the accent on the second syllable too, as Carnunos.
The second syllable.
The second syllable. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was always, I digress momentarily, but Celtic or Celtic. We were always taught Celtic, right? Hard
Yep.
K for pronunciation of all those things. I ran into a Scottish person, I mean, full on Scottish accent, and she said, Celtic, Celtic, Celtic. And I'm like, you're Scottish. Why do you pronounce it that way? And it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's just where you're from. You go around the corner, they say Celtic. You go around this corner, they say Celtic. And I was like, oh. And then I looked it up, and then I was like, oh, both pronunciations are acceptable, which was interesting because it was not what I was taught very strongly, not by a member of our group or coven, but by a member of the community at
Except,
large.
but in the 1970s, WAMU, which was a public radio station run by American University, uh, there was a regular show where the DJ Mary Cliff would play Celtic music. And it was always Celtic. So I can trace that back to the old days of
Yes.
Mary Cliff at WAMU.
Yes, and if you're
Celtic
in
folk.
Boston, it's the Celtics.
Yes,
And if you say Celtics, they may laugh at you hysterically.
probably so.
And big Irish population.
Good point. Hmm.
So if you're Irish or Scottish, it might be Celtic. And if you're a white Anglican, it might be Celtic. Right. Well, Celtic, they believe came from the Keltoi. And the Keltoi was a name that the Greeks gave the Celts.
Mhm.
Um, and somebody thought it like meant kilt, people wearing kilts, but apparently it's the Greek word for confusing, because they spoke a language that they didn't understand and it was confusing to them.
Another aspect of the old religion, which goes back to the Stone Age, in this case, the Neolithic, is the circle. Stone circles dating from 3 to 4,000 years ago are found all over the British Isles and Ireland. The classic site, of course, is Stonehenge, completed about 1500 BCE. It functioned as a cult center as well as a megalithic observatory for observing the solstitial sunrise and sunset and predicting eclipses of the sun and moon. Thus, from the Stone Age to modern times, the circle has constituted the sacred precinct within which magic could be made and into which evil could not enter. Shortly after the completion of Stonehenge on Salisbury Plain, a new concept appeared among the peoples of the Near East, a concept that was eventually to shake the pagan world to its foundations and almost destroy it. This was the idea of monotheism. It began innocuously enough in the second millennium BCE with the importation of a Hindu god named Deus Peter or Skyfather into the Near East. The Skyfather's name became slightly altered by the peoples among whom he settled. In Greece, he became Zeus, in Italy, Jupiter and Jove, and in Israel, Yahweh. In Greece and Italy, his arrival accompanied the cultural change from matriarchy to patriarchy, and his cult displaced, but did not destroy, the primeval cult of the mother goddess. Sky Father became the ruler of the gods, but the other gods continued to be worshipped.
And to slightly back up, because I did a lot of reading and research on the dolmens, which are the stone monuments that are found. They're found all over Europe, but they they're sort of all over the world because there's one in Egypt, maybe less famous. There are some that are stretching into Siberia as well. Um, So the very earliest ones that were created, were more focused on measuring the movement of the moon. So they were more lunar oriented, which I took to understand as being that they were hunting and fishing was more important at that time than the agrarian lifestyle. And as that solar cult, the influences um, from Egypt, um, through Spain, into Europe, and as that influenced the Druids, they became more solar than um, than it reflected in the monuments they built, which is interesting because the Druids are, often associated with Stonehenge, but the Druids said that they didn't build it. They just came upon it, basically.
Yes.
So the Druidic culture came later, which was more solar oriented, but the culture that was there before the Druids moved from more lunar oriented to more solar oriented, or with a balance, a perfect balance of the sun and the moon, because so they're also marking the progression of the moon as well as the sun. Just a little side note, that's my digression. Um, but we were on to monotheism, and we're kind of getting into my favorite part here.
Excellent.
Did
Go
you want me to
forth.
pick up? In Israel, Skyfather might have gone unnoticed altogether, except the Hebrews happened to be slaves in Egypt during the reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten, who introduced a short-lived monotheism around 1370 BCE. The early Hebrews, like other peoples of the Near East, had been polytheists. The Hebrew word for God, Elohim, is plural for the obvious reason that the gods were plural. The Hebrew word for the presence of God in the world is Sekhmina, a feminine noun. The sacred mountain from which Moses received the law is called Sinai, which means mountain of sin, the Babylonian moon god. So, if you were a worshiper of the moon, you were what?
A sinner.
Right. You were a sinner. You were a follower of the moon. You were a follower of sin. Your God was sin. All right. So moreover, their
Ouch.
God,
Yes.
I know. There's more too. It's just funny with the words, and that's not the only one. Moreover, the gods as well as their altars had horns. The Bible speaks of the horns of the altar, describes Moses, the Hebrew cultural hero, as having horns. Michelangelo gave the statue of Moses horns because nobody told him that he should do otherwise. He was under the impression that the Hebrews, they're talking about the horns, right? And the Hebrews were trying to say that he had a halo, right? But when you have a halo above your head, and let's say only part of which is visible, then it's a crescent, or it looks like horns. Um, by the time of the Exodus, 100 years later, Akhenaten, the Hebrews, by the time of the Exodus, 100 years after the time of Akhenaten, there we go. Um, uh, some people are like, I don't remember this Akhenaten guy, Akhenaten. Um, a lot of people remember his son, Tutankhamun, King Tut.
Exactly.
All right. So that's a connection there, right? And yes, he was very unpopular. Uh, Akhenaten destroyed, or tried to change Egypt, tried to force monotheism upon the Egyptians, and the priests at the time, they did not like that idea. Um, so, and anytime, one regime comes after another regime, you know, in Egypt, they would carve everything in the stone. And if the next guy didn't like the person before or a couple people removed, they would just carve their faces off of the wall. So when you see these Egyptian hieroglyphs and you see they're beautiful, and then you see a whole face, it's like destroyed. I always thought it was like wear and tear when I was younger. No.
It is not.
We will chisel out your name everywhere it appears in the historical record.
And
So
I'm going to digress here also,
good.
because there's a whole nother conversation to have about the meaning of names and the power contained within names too. So that's something else we'll probably talk about.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes when you mention the polytheism in respects of the Hebrew tradition, sometimes you get a lot of pushback. But there is a lot of examples where the god and the goddess come together, or the man and the woman come together. Um,
Yes.
and a lot of the very earliest traditions in the Hebrew tradition, very far back, there's dancing, and 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 so there's perhaps an element where through its evolution, it was maybe a long, long time ago, it was more like Shinto, which is another pretty awesome religion. Uh, if you want to look that up or study that, it's fascinating to me because it's another um, holy pagan tradition and ancient. And I mean, it's riveting to me, at least. Um, we're talking about the Exodus. The Hebrews were badly in need of a strong God, and Skyfather, in his guise of Jove or Yahweh, was waiting. And Yahweh had what Jupiter did not, a strong priesthood dedicated to him alone, and thus to the suppression of all other gods. So paganism died hard in Israel. The Hebrews worshipped the golden calf at the foot of Mount Sinai, and the prophets had to rail constantly against backsliding. But when it died more thoroughly than it ever did in any of Israel's daughter religions, leaving neither Trinity nor saints to remind people of the old gods. Um, but you do have the Kabbalah, which is a fascinating study on its own. But the Hebrews were numerically insignificant at this time, and despite the teachings of Jesus and the proselytism of St. Paul, monotheism did not make serious inroads against the old religion until Emperor Constantine in 306. For reasons military and political, as much as religious, made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. A lot occurred in this time frame. So we could talk for hours. Um, and if the new order was not immediately clear to the people, it was clear to the gods. For 2 brief years, the gallant Emperor Julian tried to turn back the course of history, restored paganism as the religion of the empire. Seeking to find out what the future held, he sent in 361 to Delphi for an oracle and received the message. The fair wrought house is fallen. No shelter has Apollo, nor sacred laurel leaves. The fountains are all silent, and the voices still. It was the last oracle the Pythia ever gave. 2 years later, the emperor was dead, and Christianity was restored. We didn't get into the Council of Nicaea.
Yeah, that's
I feel like we need to talk about that. But I just have recently watched a bit on Knights Templars, which I think we're going to touch on very shortly.
important
And
in the history leading up to
yeah,
our tradition. Yeah.
yeah. So this is the thing that pagans tend to focus on when it comes to Christianity is what was lost. So um, there are several pages of the Bible that they just took out in the Council of the Scene. So, and you could look this up. It's true. And this is where they took out the Book of Enoch. This is where they may have taken out writings by women. There are perhaps still writings of women in the Bible today, but their authorship was removed. So their, stories are less. In the Book of Enoch is like the one I think that's hot right now. So a lot of people do talk about that one. That's in the Ethiopian Bible, which is an earlier Bible, an older Bible, which is reinforced by finding the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are, um, they have those stories in them. But the one I read was, I think the story of Judah at the time, and when it came out, I read it. I thought it was great. Um, but you would have to go back and, do some research to read those things. But I think the important note to take away is that they wanted to get everyone on the same page and say, these are the rules that we're playing with. We're going to take out anything that might be confusing, like the Book of Enoch, and we're going to go forward from here.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm at the top of my page. You're probably in the middle of the page.
Yeah, I'm like right down here. Yeah.
Meanwhile, elsewhere in Europe.
In Europe, paganism continued to flourish more or less openly and at high places for several centuries. The English king William Rufus was a high priest of the old religion and probably died as a sacrificial victim in 1100. As late as 1347, when Joan, Countess of Salisbury, dropped her garter, then as now the emblem of a witch high priestess, King Edward III picked it up, saying, "Shame to them that think evil of it," a phrase which became the motto of the Order of the Garter, which Edward founded the following year. But the darkness of the Inquisition was descending all over Europe. In 1199, Pope Innocent III declared that heresy is the most unpardonable of treasons because it is a crime against God. In 1846, Giovanni Pico della Mirandola published 900 theses declaring the truth of the ancient philosophers. For this, he was declared a heretic by the church, but he did not stop. He wrote a Kabbalistic interpretation of Genesis and a thesis defending the literature of the Jews, whose books were being burned as heretical. And finally, he published a paper claiming that astrologers who published absolute and binding predictions were frauds and people who believed them were fools. In 1494, at the age of 30, he was murdered.
If this is a good time to take a break, we can cut it in half. If you want, unless you want to keep going. You want to keep going?
Um, let's see, we have this many
We have,
pages to go.
yeah, yeah. Remember to like and subscribe.
Remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for being here. We
And next
appreciate
week we
you.
will finish off history. And I know we're just about to get into some cool parts, including Agrippa. So one of my favorite parts. 3 books of occult philosophy.
And if one is good, three is better.
It's true.
I just made that up. Yeah. So,
Have a good week and enjoy what is beginning to be right now as we record the beginning of spring. It's
yay.
starting just, little tiny shoots of flowers coming up out of the ground. But we're still dressing warm.
Yes. A light jacket.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.